the questions that we had left over from earlier panels, and then if there's something fresh that occurs to you, please feel free. We're going to go first. I want to go to sort of a question that actually is a critique of the event itself that I think is worth noting right up front, in part because this conference, we hope ultimately is the first in a series that we'd like to do in other parts of the valley and other parts of the state, patterned more or less along what we achieved here today. And the question is, why does the conference have no female perspectives present within the members speaking within and throughout the schedule? And so I did a quick count. I think we had 2 women out of the entire event, and so it's a valid critique. One of them was out of town. So it's a valid critique, and it's something that we'll absolutely will look at in terms of the diversity of the event, any other events that we do similar to this coming up, because if we're going to speak about the importance of diversity and immigration and so on and so forth, we should be practicing what we preach. So now, beyond that, first question, spoke to state elected officials earlier discussing the fact that this was a federal problem and the federal government needed to address this. And the question is actually in a way posed to state legislators. What are they doing to actually encourage the federal government to address this? So to the panel, maybe what can people in the state, our leadership, people in this room do to more actively get Congress to actually address the issue? What do you feel can be done? Anyone, please.
Okay. I think, first of all, we need to put more of our voices to our federal contingent, our congressmen here from Arizona, and also our state senators. I took myself back to Washington, D.C. when I was a freshman student in 2003, and I visited with John McCain in his office. And he asked me, what can I do for you, Lucy? And I said, I am tired of waking up at 4:30 in the morning and turning on the news and finding out there's one more accident on one of our local freeways where 15 illegal entrants into the country pile out of a van, a green van, out of a van. And there's ICE, there's the Sheriff's Department, there's the Police Department, and bottom line is the camera follows these folks down the freeway, and that's it. I said, what are we going to do about this? How can we're not helping the situation, and we're not hindering the situation. It's just, we're turning a blind eye. What are you doing, Senator McCain, about helping us with our immigration issues? And of course, you may remember that, I believe it was during the Bush administration where President Bush announced that he had a comprehensive immigration plan. Senator McCain, this is prior to that when I was sitting there with him, he took this bill and tossed it across the desk at me, and he says, there's the immigration bill. He said, it's a bad bill. He said, I can't get it through even the way it is. He said, because I can't get the attention of 435 congressmen and 99 other senators. So he worked for 8 years to try and get something done to address illegal immigration into the country. Now, the solution we talked about all day today, and I'm not going to, this is one sentence. Process stations along the border whereby people who want to legally enter into the country can and get that money and those processes away from the coyotes who are making a ton of money off of folks. This is not hard. You can do this. And it's been out there.
So speak to your congressmen, start with them.
Yes, speak to your congressmen and your state senate, your federal senators.
Does anyone else want to expand on what we can do here to encourage our leaders to speak to?
Just, I'll add, I worked, by the way, on Capitol Hill for 12 years before moving to Arizona to practice law. And when we went back in January with a delegation from the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, and we met with a bunch of legislators, and the discouraging thing, in fact, one of our first meetings was in the office of Speaker Boehner. And we met with the staff person that wrote the Republican Pledge to America, and his #1 comment to us was never mention the word comprehensive in the same sentence with the word immigration, because it's perceived as amnesty and it's toxic. And then the second thing he said was that there's not enough competency and expertise within the United States Congress to write an immigration law, which is, of course, rather discouraging to hear when we know what competency and expertise there is in the Arizona legislature to write in there. So that would be the feds or the experts. So it's a discouraging thing, and what has to happen is everybody agrees the system is broken, but fixing one part of the system, even everybody says, well, we've got to start with border security. I don't care what you do with the border. 30% of the people who are in this country undocumented are visa overstays. Unless you can say nobody from a foreign country can ever come in here, there's going to be undocumented people. So you have to fix the visa problem and the employment problem. At the same time, you do whatever you want to do with the border. But for whatever reason, the public seems to be caught up with the border security, border security, border security, when that's not a solution. We need to get enough people to understand the totality of the situation, or else get enough horse trading where the border security stuff doesn't get through unless there's a comprehensive solution at the same time as well. So it definitely has to be a federal solution.
Anyone else? Okay. Next question is, it kind of goes to this question about border security. Is there a way to speak about the issue of security and immigration and not have it completely focused on the border? You just alluded to the fact that I think the number actually may be higher, maybe somewhere closer to the 40% range of people who are in the country undocumented came basically overstayed visas. So they were students or workers or had some other capacity. But is there a way to sort of refocus that discussion so that we don't get bogged down on this question of can't let anyone across the border?
The issue of border security is really fundamental in terms of national identity. We can't understand the concept of America unless we use this geographical thing called a border. And in an age where terrorism and change and other things are piling on us at a light speed, people who are feeling insecure in their own personal lives, economically and otherwise, are going to look at this issue as in a myopic fashion and respond to enforcement-only solutions, respond to, we're not going to do anything until we have the border completely secure. Again, as you saw the legislative panel here today, responding to that blackmail, really. The blackmail that defeats common sense and reason. So I think, first of all, and I'm not sure how this works, but I think it's important to understand that there's a legitimate concern about the border. Why? Who are we if we don't have one? Are we just a mob of people up here, in this North American jurisdiction? So that's one thing that I think, at least understanding. Now, how you present that, but in the way I look at it, or the way we understand people who are angry, upset, vulnerable, emotionally, economically, and therefore angry, upset. They're concerned about what happened to Norman Rockwell. The picture of America never really exists, but that's our picture, How can we be who we are? Another thing, the xenophobia that is driving the cultural resistance. I think, again, we need to understand why people react and respond in fear and anger. It's a natural thing. It's an allergic reaction. The immune system, first of all, biologically, rejects those things that are new and different as potentially toxic. And so when we see a stranger who's of a different culture, notwithstanding the biblical admonitions to embrace our brethren as brother human beings, there's a natural, ingrained, instinctual response to that which is different. And is it a threat? We need to find out first, before we open the door to our hearth and our threshold, is this person a threat? So those issues get coupled with these matters of national identity. How we get there on the national level it mystifies me, really, unless an administration gets behind it and sort of gathers the forces in the Congress, because Congress can't do it on its own. It won't. And we can't do it unless we create an enormous movement that trumps any reactionary response, the fear-based, the heat that congressmen and women feel when people send bricks. During, I think it was Jim Colby told us that people who were upset were sending bricks every day to the office to express their anger and upset. People who have a lot of time on their hands, who dial and dial and dial and dial. So in order to counteract that, you have to surmount it. You have to get beyond it in the compelling manner in which your message is delivered to the delegation, beginning with the delegates here in Arizona. Again, the state legislature, same thing with Congress. I mean, it's a huge electoral challenge. We can no longer hire our politics done by politicians' audience. We have to civically engage in the electoral process to create the connectivity that will allow us to solve these and other issues.
Thank you. If I can, Lucy, you have some comments, and then I'd like to go to the chief, since the chief's obviously dealing day to day with that question.
Okay, thank you. It was said earlier, and I thought it was such a great statement. I think Mr. Rasmussen was the one that I want to credit this for. And two, he said instead of viewing the Hispanic segment of the population as obstacles, we need to embrace them as solutions. And I think that until we can have that kind of discussion, and Sheridan was positively eloquent in a very calm, thoughtful way. You can tell I'm dramatic. I have a daughter that's a master's in theater, but it's in the family. You know, until we can have that kind of thoughtful, rational discussion with people who we're just diametrically opposed, or at least it appears that way. Maybe we're not so far apart. Maybe we have enough concerns on all sides of this issue that we can actually bring law enforcement, and we can bring the business community, and we can bring the legal community from both sides that are all Hispanic and white and whatever. I mean, Czechoslovakian, I don't know, Chinese, whatever. Bring us all together and have those discussions. I think this is a great start today. I'm very impressed with what I've heard already. I want to see this keep going.
Chief?
When you talk about border security, there's a lot of focus on the Arizona border. And if you look at the United States, there's thousands of miles of coastline all along it, on both sides. And what doesn't come to the coastline can go to Canada and come across that border. And so when you talk about securing the border, I think it's an unrealistic expectation that it's ever going to be so secure that nobody's going to come across at any non-regulated point. So when we look at those points, and are there issues with the Arizona border? Absolutely, there are. I mean, when the agent Terry was killed, not more than 5 miles from where I actually live, I was at the briefing with the Homeland Security Secretary and the staff of the Border Patrol. And when they show photographs, both daylight and at night, of armed intrusion carrying loads of narcotics with AK-47s, I'm wondering where I live. So there are those issues that have to be addressed. But in the scheme of the border, we're talking a very enormous undertaking, as has been mentioned, to get it to the point where we don't have those things. And what we need to do is focus on the root cause of that. Why does it occur, and who's doing it, and go after those major funneling, major trafficking organizations, and even the trafficking organizations, because the border has become secure than it was, are now getting into the human smuggling because it is more profitable. So we need to focus all our efforts, both federally, locally, and by counties, to focus in on those organizations that funnel that. And I think until we do that, we're going to continue to have these issues.
Okay, next question. During the last legislative session, there was, and it's been mentioned a few times, an omnibus bill of 5 immigration-related bills that were defeated, somewhat to the surprise, I think, of many people, perhaps even in this room and around the state. The business community was in part credited with doing work in advance behind the scenes, and they also issued a public letter at some point speaking out against the legislation. And sent a direct message that really funneled down to this, that passing more legislation like 1070 would simply do more damage to the state's economy and the image of the state, which is tied to the economy, and so therefore it was just a bad idea. And so a number of legislators did decide to vote against it. What else can and should the business community do with regards to this subject?
Well, I'll speak to that. I've chaired the Arizona Chamber of Commerce Employment Committee for 20 years. So we were very active in opposing Prop 200, the very first one of these Russell Pierce initiatives. In fact, my wife and law partner, Julie Pace, was the co-chair of the committee that opposed that. And she's a 4th generation Arizonan, blonde Republican whose family grew up in Navajo County, and they still got a ranch up there, so it was the right demographics to try to speak that this was anti-Arizonan, but obviously the people passed that, and we had this whole wave of anti-immigration legislation. We were very actively involved in opposing much of that through the employer sanctions law. I think the business community focused its efforts on immigration laws that affected business as opposed to street-level immigration enforcement, and I think there was criticism of the business community, justifiably, that they did not do enough on the street-level stuff. And SB 1070 was a street-level bill, not a bill targeted against employers. So the business community there negotiated an amendment to take out the most obnoxious parts of the bill, but then otherwise stayed out of the fight because it wasn't something targeted to employers. And I think did not realize and did not foresee the backlash that would occur. And for all the criticism of the boycott certainly got the attention of the business community. And so this year it was a very different thing. And I think at this point the business community is mobilized. And I'm on the board of directors of the Arizona Chamber. And this is something where executives who 3 years ago didn't talk up much on immigration, they speak up now. It's like their major concern is that we don't get more of a black eye because it affects how we're perceived. When they talk to colleagues in other states and you look about attracting businesses here, what kind of a reputation do we have? And it's both national and international. In fact, one little vignette on that, my son lives in Argentina, and he went there because of the labor market. He can find better workers for a lot cheaper, smart, college-educated, high-tech people opening his businesses down there. So he's been there for 7 years. The last summer he's visiting me, and he's talking to his fiancée on the phone. She's still down there in Argentina, and she happened to be at her parents' house. Her father does not speak English, so he gets his news from the local press. And he hears her on the phone speaking, and he says to her, "Are you talking to Taylor?" And he says, she says, "Yes." He says, "Cut it short. He's in Arizona. If that Sheriff Arpaio hears him speaking Spanish, they'll come arrest him." That's the reputation, unfortunately, Arizona now has, worldwide. And in fact, I did the search on the Buenos Aires newspaper. There's 78 mentions of Arpaio. That's how much media coverage he gets down there. So the business community is hearing this, and I think it's now finally, got the message to be proactive and actively support the legislators who had the courage to stand up and vote no on those immigration bills, and hopefully that momentum will carry forward so that we can do constructive things to grow the economy and get the message that anti-immigration legislation is bad for the economy and bad for business and bad for the whole state.
Okay, Lucy, and we have to wrap up because they're going to run us out of this building. So Lucy, if you could just take 2 minutes really quick.
I will, maybe not even that long. The omnibus bill this last year, I think it was 1161 or 1116.
611.
Anyway, the omnibus bill on immigration. That bill, let me just tell you what it was. It was what I call the mop-up bill. That was every single bad provision that we had tossed off of other immigration bills for the last 5 years. Now, some of you know that. I just want to make sure that you all know that, and that we make sure that, I mean, if Russell Pierce comes back, we're going to have those bills again. Thank goodness we have seasoned representatives who now are in the Senate, and there were 12 of them who actually read the bill and were backed up by the business community and others in the state to go ahead and vote against it. This is the only way we're going to get past these intimidation tactics that are very, very real. And so I urge you to enlist yourselves to help us with the legislature to have the courage to continue on doing good things for you.
All right, I have a couple of quick closing comments, but if we would please, a round of applause for our panelists.